with our people. We have just started the recording, and we will begin here in about 3 minutes. I trust that everyone is staying dry and warm today. Here in South Texas, it's raining a little bit. And we just have a couple of minutes to go. We've got a great group today. It's wonderful to see everyone.
Makes me long for March when we're actually in Denton looking at one another eyeball to eyeball.
Yes.
I'm very, very excited about that.
Someone's teasing us with clear skies.
Wonder if we have anybody from Buffalo who's 6 foot deep in snow today.
Oh my, yes. Continuing to let people in. Great. Well, I'm very excited. We have such a wonderful group today. Well, it looks like it is about 2 o'clock. And as we are all muted now, let's begin. Good afternoon and welcome, members and friends, to this, the third installment of the Tejas Storytelling Association's virtual event series. I am Rick Davis, the Vice President of TSA. Our new virtual event series features performances direct from our affiliated guilds around Texas and Oklahoma. These events are being presented to you through online Zoom meetings and being made available to the general membership of TSA as a free member benefit. Now, please remember to be certain and mute your microphones during the presentation. This is being recorded and will be replayed on TSA's YouTube channel at a later date. And now, on with the show. The Tejas Storytelling Association presents TELLABRATION, a Cornucopia of stories. Each teller will represent one of our affiliated guilds around Texas. Our Master of Ceremonies will lead you through today's event. He is a retired construction project engineer, not retiring due to age, but because he found his true calling as a storyteller, speaker, clown, and balloon artist. And he does more than just clown around. He is the current president of the Tejas Storytelling Association. It is my honor and my distinct privilege. I present to you Mr. David Claunch.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate that introduction. And we are here for an event called TELLABRATION. There was a gentleman named Paul Pinkerton who had this idea many years ago, and they put this together. It's called TELLABRATION. It's sponsored by the National Storytelling Network. I have been honored to be part of TELLABRATIONs all over America, in Jonesboro, Tennessee, in Virginia Beach. As a matter of fact, I was talking to somebody earlier today. The second storytelling event I ever went to was a TELLABRATION in Virginia Beach, and somehow Norris Spencer got Connie Reagan Blake and Bill Lepp to Virginia Beach for TELLABRATION. That was awesome. but it's more of a ground roots kind of a thing traditionally. And it has an official proclamation to introduce it. So without further ado, in the name of storytelling, the National Storytelling Network and the Tejas Storytelling Association are proud to sponsor TELLABRATION, Saturday, November 19th, 2022. I hereby proclaim to be TELLABRATION, the worldwide event of storytelling, at this very moment across 6 continents in 40 states and 9 countries, from Sacramento to Savannah, Boise to Barcelona, West Virginia to the West Indies, El Paso to Texarkana. Over 300 audiences are gathering for this spectacular storytelling event. Without further delay, enjoy and anticipation, let the stories begin. In our tradition, we like to give the jazz hands when we're given applause. So please welcome. We do have storytellers from all over Texas. We have 9 of our guilds represented. And our first storyteller is Elizabeth Beamon. She comes to us from Little D Storytelling Guild, which is the new guild that's coming out of the ashes of COVID in Denton, Texas. So please help me welcome Elizabeth Beamon.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here. This story is from my childhood. 6 little ducks that I once knew. Fat one's skinny, one's fair, one's two. But the one little duck with a feather on her back, she led the others with a quack, 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 quack. She led the others with a quack, 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 quack. I have many stories about how much my mother loved birds. But today I'm going to tell you when I was only 13. My mom was pregnant with our 6th, well, the 6th baby of the family. And I had, at Christmas, had gotten a chick. And that chick had grown up to be a little hen. And the hen in the spring had laid 10 eggs. And the hen sat on the eggs. And if you know anything about chickens, about 21 days, the chicks will start to hatch after the hen sits on them that long. So I had kept track, and I asked my mother, may I skip school on Thursday because I think the chickens are going to hatch? And she said, Elizabeth, that's a very special thing to witness. But if they don't hatch on Thursday, you have to go back to school on Friday. You can't stay out the whole week. I said, okay, that's fine, Mom. So sure enough, on Thursday, when all my brothers and my sister went to school, I went out to the chicken coop. The chicken coop was about almost a half a football field away from our home. We lived in the woods. And so I went out there and I crawled in to the chicken coop and I pushed the hen off the eggs to see if they started hatching. Well, they hadn't yet. So I went back to the house and had some breakfast and talked to Mom for a few minutes. And then I went back out. And sure enough, I climbed in the chicken coop. I moved the hen. And I checked. And they were starting to pip. So I watched. And sure enough, 1 came out, 2 came out. And when chickens hatch, they're not all fluffy right away. They're all wet and look sticky, but I didn't touch them. I watched, and very soon they were all fluffy and they just started running around. So there were already 9 chicks that had hatched. And the mommy she was all right with me hanging out there because she knew me. And then I watched the last chick and it was pipping, but it wasn't coming out of the egg. And so I decided to help it. Now, it's not a really good plan, but I didn't know I'm 13, So I helped the chick out. And sure enough, it was all wet and gooey looking, but it dried. It was so cute. It was like this cute little yellow and brown. But I don't know. I hope it wasn't my fault, but it could have been because the little chick limped. So it was limping around, and sadly, all the brothers and sister chicks recognized it was different. And so they all ran and was pecking on it. So I picked it up. I climbed out of the coop. I went as fast as I could to the house. And I didn't mention how the chick had gotten hurt. I just, Mom, this chick is limping. The other chicks are picking on it. Can I keep it in the house and it can be my pet? And she said, you know, Elizabeth, that's a good plan. I like that. So we got a little box and we put some, a little straw in there, and she could be in my room. Now, we lived in a brand new house. It had wood floors, beautiful, tall glass ceilings, no curtains because we lived in the woods. And so the chick would recognize when I would come home, like the next day I went to school. In a few days, the chick knew that I was its mama, or really anybody that wanted to feed it was its mama. But when I would come home from school, the chick would jump out of the box, run down the wood floor, and peeping all the way. Beep, 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 beep. Oh, so excited to see me or whoever would be willing to feed it. Oh, we just love that chick. And I, of course, named it a very unusual, original name, Pet. It was a sweet little fluffy chick, and it was a bantam. Those are tiny chicks. And so she started to put feathers on, and every day she would jump down and run beep, 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 when we came home from school. And Mom was very gracious to let that chicken stay in our home. And so she actually got over limping, but I didn't suggest that she should go back to the coop because, I was enjoying having a pet in the house. So as she grew, she had feathers, and she turned to a beautiful white, and she had little black specks on her, and she was really pretty, really tiny. One day, my father was a farmer, and so one day he came home from the farm, and he was hot and sweaty. We didn't have air conditioning, and so he came home, and Mom had been cooking, and she was a wonderful cook, and so she just kept cooking and cooking. She made this beautiful, it smelled so wonderful, a big bowl of spaghetti, a big green salad, garlic bread. Oh, we were so excited to have spaghetti. It was really unusual for us to have pasta in our home since my dad was a rice farmer. So Mom had already put the bowl of spaghetti on the table. It was a big round table. And here came Pet to greet my dad. Beep, 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 beep. And she jumped up on the chair, and she jumped up on the table to see him, but she noticed there was a big bowl of worms. And so she ran over there and started pecking in the spaghetti. Well, my father just yelled for me, Elizabeth, Elizabeth. I knew that tone. I came running. Yeah, Daddy, get this chicken and put it in the coop. I said, Daddy, it's my pet. She didn't mean to do that. She didn't know it wasn't worms. Elizabeth, I knew not to argue. I grabbed Pet and I took her, half a football field out to the coop and put it with her brothers and sisters. And she lived there, and she was really happy. But the funny thing was, she had just gotten to this point in her life where she wanted to lay eggs. And so my mom would watch for her because she would come running at the time it was time to lay an egg. She would run all the way and come to the house, jump up on the porch, and peck if the door wasn't open. The sliding glass door to my brother's room was not open. She would peck at that. And then my mom would notice, and she would go open the door, and she would jump into a drawer that my brothers had, and my mom had put a light bulb. Now, why she went to my brother's room and not mine, I don't know. But she would lay an egg, then she would hop out of the door, and she would run all the way back to the coop. And this went on for many, many months. And I thought that was so special that my mom would love my chicken enough to leave a door open, because if she went out with friends, she just left it open. And that's my story about the chicken named Pet. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I love stories about chickens. That's a really neat story. Pet. So thank you, Pet's mama. I do want to mention one thing as we're going through. Please keep an eye on the chat. You're welcome to put something into the chat, and Janet is putting some really cool information in the chat as we go along. So thank you again, Elizabeth. Our next teller, I don't multitask very well, but this fella kind of does, because we have a tech team. This thing doesn't happen out of a vacuum. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that happens. As a matter of fact, Dean Keith is one of our tech people. We have David Brock working tech behind the scenes. Sue Kuentz is working tech behind the scenes, and Janet Bickel-Burton is working tech behind the scenes. So let's give them a round of applause. Thank you all so much for being willing to do the behind the scenes work. And not only behind the scenes work, Mr. Keith is also a wonderful storyteller. I also think I'll just introduce him as Eli's granddaddy. So come tell us a story.
Okay, so this story is called Co-Ed Softball, if you couldn't tell from my background here. So this happened many years ago. So I was sitting calmly in my office working when suddenly Big Eddie comes running in. So now Big Eddie isn't because he was big in any way, shape, or form. Big Eddie was called Big Eddie because he had one of those abilities that just sort of... So Big Eddie comes in and he says, all right, we're going to be starting a co-ed softball team and you're going to... Well, as soon as I heard that, I just had flashbacks to being 11 years old, sitting on the bench in Little League, in which I was the player that had to be played at least 2 innings a game. And so I'm like, oh no, this is not a good thing. I said, oh, why me? So Big Eddie says, well, it's because you won the dart tournament. Now this is true. I can throw darts and I can throw them pretty accurately, but that has nothing to do with being out in the field trying to hit or catch a baseball. I said, well, what about the 2 Tommies? Now the 2 Tommies are a couple of guys that met way back when they were in middle school. And they are the epitome of athletic type. So they met playing, I don't know, wrestling or some kind of ball. And then as they went into high school, they just did all the sports together. There was the basketball team, the baseball team, the wrestling team, the track team. They did all of that stuff. And so what happens when you've got young men who've graduated from high school or maybe even gone to college and graduated from college, and they're not pro athletes, they play softball. So these were the epitome of softball players, and I was like, good, if we're going to be a team with the 2 Tommies, well, we got it easy. He said, well, the 2 Tommies are like, you know, you guys are just starting. We'll see how long you do. So anyway, so let me explain a little bit about co-ed softball. So co-ed softball is set up so that there are actually 10 people on the team. There have to be 5 guys and 5 girls, and they alternate batting. So that's 4 people in the outfield. And it's called slow pitch, which means that when you pitch the ball, remember I'm the pitcher, when you pitch the ball, it can't go straight, that would be too fast, and it can't have too high of an arc, so it has to just be somewhere in the middle. And then it would go over the plate. So basically it was a pretty easy hit for the most part, and so it was really relying on the fielders to do all the hard work. So we got into the league. Now, the way that the city had this organized is that there are 4 leagues. There's the A League, the B League, C League, and guess what? We were in the D League. So this was all of the new teams coming in or the ones who just couldn't sustain themselves very well. And we made it through the first season there in the D League. As a matter of fact, we even won a game. Yeah, actually, we won 2 games. One game we won by forfeit because the other team didn't have enough players. And we won the actual game because, well, frankly, they were just worse than we were. So anyway, so we now won, and season was over, and I'm like a big relief. So several weeks later, Big Eddie comes back in the office and he says, all right, we're going to be signing up for the next season. And this time we got the 2 Tommies. I said, okay, 2 Tommies. All right. And he said, as a matter of fact, well, not only do we have the 2 Tommies, but we have their wives and Tommy outfield. So this is Tommy outfield and Tommy infield, just so you can kind of keep it straight. So Tommy outfield's wife is Carla, and her mom is going to be the catcher, and her name is Debbie. Okay, so we get out there, and so it's going to be the first game. Of course, you know, they don't come to the practices, so we're out there just trying to pitch things and hit the ball and stuff and learn some kind of the basics. And so we show up for the first game, and then they show up. Now, we all had team shirts, but at that point, that's kind of where it ended. So you either have blue jeans or cut off or shorts. Now, these folks show up with the full pants, you know, with the stirrups underneath the foot. And they got these long bags in which they've got their various aluminum ball bats, right? And then so they sit down in there and they take their regular shoes off and they put their cleat shoes on and they're out there stretching behind the thing. And I'm just like, oh man, this is a completely different world for me. So Debbie, the catcher, sits down next to me. She says, okay, let's work on our hand signals. I'm like, hand signals. So my method of pitching is, I hope it goes over the plate. So the thing with pitching is that is kind of a dangerous position, right? Because you're throwing the ball and sometimes the batter will hit the ball and it will go right at the pitcher. So being that I'm as athletic as a box turtle, my philosophy of thinking about what's going to happen if that ball comes to me is I'm just going to drop down like this and cover up just like a turtle would. So anyway, so that was my plan. So some pitchers would actually take a step or two back, kind of beyond the mound, so they'd have maybe a little bit more time. Well, I wasn't that aware because I was just too curious to see if the ball was actually going to go over the plate. So I didn't really have the mental wherewithal to take those kind of steps back. Fortunately, it never really happened, given that we're playing in the D League, and that really wasn't likely to happen. So anyway, so Debbie starts going into her. So when I go like this, when I go like that, and so I said, okay, great. And she had all these different signals. There's about 6 of them, and you kind of had to keep track of. So we went out and we had our first inning. We come back in and she sits down next to me. She doesn't really look at me. She just kind of says, well, the other team doesn't really know that you don't have any control over the ball, because she was, of course, giving me all these signals and none of them really went where she wanted me to throw them. And I said, okay, great. So anyway, so she says, they won't know. They'll just kind of figure that out. Well, as you can well imagine, with the 2 Tommies, the 2 Tommy wives, and Debbie on the home plate, we did really, really well in the D League. We won the championship for the D League. And then when we had the playoffs with the C winner, right? And we won that one. And so now we're going to be playing the winner of the A-B League playoff, which of course was the A League. And this team was called Al's Plumbers. Now, Al's Plumbers, on their shirts, on the back, they had a plunger. Well, of course, you know, Al's Plumbing. So I kind of had this picture that when Al's Plumbing first started out, he had his plunger and his thing was like, have plunger, will travel. So that was kind of what my picture of what Al's Plumbing was. But of course, now he's got a series of trucks and he has all these players and all that type of thing. So always won the series there in the A League. So we're having in the playoff game and everything is going really well because we are competitive, because we've got, you know, our 2 Tommies and the wives, and they've got whoever they've got. And so now it's the top of the 9th inning. We are 1 run ahead. If we can hold that lead, we will win the game. Awesome. All right, so first one up is a guy player. And so throw the ball a couple of times and then find that he hits it and he gets onto first base. because he hits it over to center field, which is fielded well, thrown to second, so he can't go anywhere, so he stops there first. The next one up is a girl player, and she takes a swing and misses on my first pitch, and then I pitch again, and she hits the ball. Now, that turtle brain of mine is very well aware, and as you all recognize, animals have much faster reflexes than we do. So that turtle brain of mine realized that the ball was not going to hit me, but that was going to be going nearby. So my turtle brain said, catch it. So I threw my glove out just like that. And guess what? I caught the ball. Now, Big Eddie is over here and he's jumping up and down going, yes, yes, throw it to first, throw it to first. Because as soon as that ball hit the bat, that little tink sound that you have when you have aluminum bats, you know, because the ball goes in and then it tinks back out and the ball flies off. So throw it to first. So as soon as the runner on first heard that, he starts running to second. So I quick throw it over to Lisa. 2 outs, 1 out to go. Yes, yes, we're on our way. Now comes up Shark. Now, we're in the 9th inning, so we've already seen Shark a few times. I mean, that's his name. He's got it right here on his shirt, Shark. And I think it's because he had those cold, dead eyes of a shark. And Shark, when he would get up to the plate, he wouldn't stand in the batter's box like anyone else would. What Shark would do is he'd take a couple of steps back out of the batter's box. He would see a ball coming that he thought that he would like. Then he'd take a couple of steps forward and then he'd swing the ball. So he had all this body momentum and hit the ball. Now, of course, the first time he did that, Debbie, who is the catcher and a very stickler for rules, starts complaining to the ump, that he's done in the batter's box. And so the ump's just saying, play ball. So finally, Carla, Debbie's daughter out in the outfield, yells, Mom, cut it out. So Debbie kind of settles down and allows Shark to do that. Anyway, so Shark gets up there and I throw my first pitch, and it's actually a strike. I'm really kind of surprised. And he doesn't like it. He decides he's not going to swing at that one. Throw the next one, and it's a ball. He realizes that as soon as he sees it coming. And the next one he likes. You can just see it in his eyes, his cold, dead eyes, just focus on that ball. And he takes a swing and he smashes that ball in a line drive that's heading right over to right field, which is where Tommy outfield plays. Now, Carla, who is floating on there and kind of like the 4th outfielder, she just kind of floats. What's interesting about these people is that as soon as the bat hits the ball, they know where that ball is going to go. So Tommy outfield realizes that ball is going to be going over his head. He can't reach it. Carla, as soon as she sees and hears the bat hitting the ball, she starts running towards Tommy, her husband. And she's yelling, cup your hands. Now, Tommy at first doesn't really realize what this means, but the second time she says it, it's in that tone that any husband would recognize that he better do what his wife says, or there is going to be trouble, okay? So he cups his hands, and she runs up and steps into his hands, and he tosses her back so he's flat on the ground looking up at her like he just rocketed her into the sky, and he's going, get it, and she's out reaching like the Statue of Liberty for that ball, and she's reaching, and she caught it. We won the game. Yes. Now Big Eddie is running around. He's running around onto the field. Yeah. And all I could think of is, plunge that, Al's Plumbers. Thank you very much.
Plunge that. I love that story. Thank you very much, Dean. And you all can tell that he's as good a techie as he is storyteller. Thank you, Dean. I appreciated all of those visuals. I'm a baseball guy, and well, y'all know that I live in Houston, home of the world. I'm sorry. Thank you though, Dean. I appreciate that. Now, in this new world of techie stuff and Zoom stuff, sometimes we have little hiccups that we really can't control. And one of our tellers, I'm not sure if he's actually here or not. His name shows up. So I'm going to talk for a minute. Decee, can you get in and give us a sound check real quick? We've got somebody to go right behind you. So if we're still working on tech issues, we can roll. But if there's any way you can chime in, I don't see anything, so I'm going to assume that we're still having tech issues, and we'll just roll right on to our next teller, who is Leslie Buie. Now, Leslie, he has served TSA well. He's been a board member. He's one of those guys that if you ever need anything done, you just call Leslie, and he says, absolutely, I'll be able to help you out with that. So we really appreciate all that you've done for us all these years. I forgot to mention Dean. Forgive me. Dean is from North 40 Storytellers. So he's the representative from North 40, and Rockwall's representative is Leslie Buie. So please let's welcome Leslie to the screen. You're muted, Leslie. You're muted. We can't hear you, Leslie. We can't hear you, Leslie. You're muted, my friend. One of those tech things, yes.
How about that? You got me?
Yes.
In that rural community where I grew up, there was only one church. New Hope Baptist Church was a one-room frame structure, had never seen a coat of paint, and it sat about 4 feet off the ground. And it was supported by 5 perfectly round, very strong heart pine pillars. There was one pillar that sat right under the center of the church and one under each of the 4 corners of the church. Now, 2 of the most loyal members of that church were my Aunt Audrey and my Aunt Beatrice. Now, Aunt Audrey and Aunt Beatrice were old maid sisters. They lived in the house they had been born in, raised in, and in time had inherited from their parents. Now, Aunt Audrey and Aunt Beatrice traveled around the community in an old Model A Ford. Now, Aunt Beatrice, she was the more adventuresome of the 2, and she had learned to drive, and so she did all the driving. Aunt Audrey never learned to drive. She couldn't even start the old car. She had to. In fact, if you ask her about it, she said, not proper for ladies to be driving automobiles anyway. But she never hesitated to ride when Aunt Beatrice was driving. Well, sadly and unfortunately, Aunt Beatrice's eyesight began to go bad. And over a period of a couple of years, she went totally blind. I say totally blind. She could tell the difference in daylight and dark, and she could see the outline of a tobacco barn if somebody pointed it out to her. But she certainly couldn't see well enough to continue driving that old Model A around the community. But the 2 of them, they were not going to let a little blindness stop them. So they figured out a way that they could continue to use that old Model A and do their traveling around the community. You see, now Aunt Beatrice would get in on the wheel and do the driving like she always had. But Aunt Audrey, sitting in the passenger seat, would give her directions. For example, they'd be going down the road and Aunt Audrey would say to Aunt Beatrice, they called each other sister all the time. So, sister, you better slow down a little bit. There's a hog in the road up there. Okay, sister, you can pick your speed back up now. He's out of the road. Sister, you better move over to the left a little bit. You're getting too close to this ditch over here. Okay, straighten up. Now, sister, we're going to be turning in down here at Mrs. Tucker's Lane. Now, it's not too far. It's a left-hand turn. And it's not too far, so you begin to slow down a little bit. Okay, we're getting closer. Get a little slower, a little bit slower. Okay, close now. Turn, straighten up, straighten up. And in that way, they continued to travel around the community in that old Model A Ford. Now, all the neighbors and friends understood the circumstances, so whenever they see them coming down the road in that Model A, they just pull off the side of the road, stop and park and wait for them to get by. Well, they were, Aunt Audrey and Aunt Beatrice, they were much too proud to admit it, but I always believed that they realized that they were a hazard driving around that old car that way. And I believe too that they made allowances for it. I noticed always that, for example, that they were a little bit late getting to church. And I believe it was because they wanted to wait for everybody else to get inside the church before they come driving into the churchyard in that old Model A Ford. Now, on this particular Sunday, Aunt Audrey and Aunt Beatrice got to church a little bit late as usual. They made that big circle around the back of the churchyard and pulled up right by the back corner of the church where they always parked, with the old Model A headed out towards the main road. That's so they wouldn't have to be twisted and turning after the service was over and everybody was out in the churchyard. Well, on this Sunday, they made that circle and they came back to that back corner where they always park. But it had rained the night before, and there was a little puddle of water right there by the corner of the church. And when the back wheel of that Model A hit that puddle of water, it skidded sideways just a little bit. Now, you need to know, you probably do, but you need to remember that Model A's had some outstanding features about them. And one of the very outstanding features was that they had two very strong, flexible steel bumpers, one on the front and one on the rear. And the ends of those bumpers were sort of curved around a little bit as though they protect those fine fenders. Those bumpers set out from the car, if you recall, a ways, one in front and then the one in the back. Well, when that Model A skidded sideways in that mud puddle, that strong rear bumper hooked around that corner pillar and pulled it right out from under the church. Well, it was all so smooth and easy, so Aunt Audrey and Aunt Beatrice never realized they even bumped anything. But when they pulled that corner pillar out from under the church, that corner of the church began to settle down towards the ground, and the opposite corner began to raise up in the air. And the old church sat there rocking, balanced on that center pillar and the two under the opposite corners. Well, now, on the inside of the church about this time, Reverend Hill was getting into one of his fire and brimstone sermons. And he was just saying to the congregation, "When judgment day comes, ye who have not repented of your sins, ye who have not made things with your neighbors, made things right with your neighbors, will be in danger of descending into the fiery pits of." And it was right then that Aunt Audrey and Aunt Beatrice removed that corner pillar and the church began to rock. Well, now the pianist at New Hope Baptist Church was Miss Mamie Lou. She was the only person in the community that knew how to play the piano, and that's being rather generous with the term play. And so she played for all the services all the time, no matter what. And when she played the piano, she sat on one of these little round stools. You've probably seen them. They have little glass knobs on the bottom of the legs so you can slide them around on the floor real easy. And if you want to raise the height of it, you turn the seat one way. If you want to lower it, you turn the other way. You know what I'm talking about. Well, Miss Mamie Lou sat on one of those stools when she played the piano, and she had perfected her balance on that stool so well that she could go sound asleep and never bobble. So it was her custom that every Sunday after she got through playing for the opening hymns, she'd doze off and go to sleep sitting on that little stool. And then she'd wake up in time to play for the closing hymns. Well, When this corner of the church, on this Sunday, she had already played and was already asleep. In this corner of the church began to settle down toward the ground, and this one raised up in the air. That put the floor of the church on an incline. And the piano, the stool, and Miss Mamie Lou, all as though they were a single unit, began to slide and roll down towards that corner that was now settling down towards the ground. Now, there's something else you need to know about that place and in those times, and that is that dogs, especially hunting dogs, were held in high esteem. They were like a member of the family, treated like one of the kids, better in some cases. So it was just naturally accepted that anywhere they went, their dogs were allowed to go as well. And inside the church was no exception. So curled up in that corner, the one that was settling down lower and the one toward which the piano, Mamie Lou, and Stu were slowly sliding, was Old Soldier. Now, Old Soldier was Lon Sippins' favorite hunting dog. And Old Soldier, he was curled up in the corner and he'd gone to sleep. He was taking his morning nap as well. And I guess he'd heard all the sermons, so there's nothing lost. But when the piano bumped up against the wall, it happened to catch Old Soldier's tail about that far from the end, between a leg of the piano and a 2x4 upright in the wall. Well, you can understand how that brought that poor old dog out of his deep sleep. And he jumped up, and I don't know if he was hurting more or more frightened, but he stripped his tail out from between that piano leg and that 2x4, and he started running around in the church, yelping and hollering at every step. He made 3 trips around Reverend Hill and the pulpit, made a pass across the back of the church, down the side, and out the front door. A very concerned Lon Sippins was close in behind him. Well, now, when the piano bumped the wall, that jarred Miss Mamie Lou awake, and she was off time and out of place and didn't know what was going on. But she figured it was time for her to do something. So she started right into playing Nearer, My God, to Thee. Well, the congregation, having just heard Reverend Hill's admonition about Judgment Day and making things right, and seeing the piano, Miss Mamie Lou, go sliding across the floor for no good reason, and Old Soldier come out of a deep sleep and start having running fits all over the church, and feeling the church rocking and floating like it may go floating off up in the air at any time. Well, they just assumed that Judgment Day was at hand. And so they got up and started moving about in the church and greeting each other and making things right. Well, there was Miss Bessie and Miss Lucy. They were hugging each other, patting each other on the back, tears coming down their cheeks, and they were smiling. They hadn't spoke to each other in 5 years. And there were neighbors over here shaking hands. They've been fighting over a fence line, shaking hands, patting each other on the shoulder, smiling. And there was old Leroy Johnson. He was paying folks money. He'd been owing them a long time. And so as they moved about in the church, greeting each other and making things right, the weight in the church shifted, and as weight continued to shift, the church continued to rock, balanced on those 3 pillars. Well, that was about the state of affairs by the time Aunt Audrey and Aunt Beatrice made it from the back corner where they parked around and came in the front door. And poor Aunt Beatrice, she was being blind, she couldn't get any out, didn't know what was going on. But somebody later reported that they heard her say to Aunt Audrey, said, "Lordy, sister, Reverend Hill is preaching hot and heavy today. He's got this old church rocking away." Well, after a time, they figured out what had happened, and it was not Judgment Day after all. But they took it serious. They took all of these things as a sign that they needed to make some changes in the life of the church. So that very afternoon, they called a meeting of all the members, and they voted on a number of things. First, they voted to change the name of the church from New Hope Baptist Church to Rockaway Community Church. Secondly, and this one took some doing, but they voted that no longer would dogs be allowed inside the church during services. And lastly, they voted to designate a parking place for Aunt Audrey and Aunt Beatrice a little further out from the church that would be reserved for them for as long as they needed it. You know, sometimes this God of ours picks some strange ways to bring about change where change is needed to right wrongs and to restore relationships. Pillars of the church. David.
Well done, Leslie. Thank you so much. A lovely story. And I teach high school physics, and I'm thinking of all of the physics lessons that I could develop out of your story. So I appreciate those. And I love the lessons learned. If we don't learn lessons, what are we doing? So thank you. Leslie from Rockwall. Our next storyteller comes from what we know in the TSA as SASA, the San Antonio Storytelling Association. Those folks do a lot of stuff. So you'll see SASA and hear SASA all the time. And those are our friends from San Antonio Storytelling Association. And our SASA representative today is Mark Babino. So please raise your hands and welcome Mark Babino to the screen.
Well, once, twice, thrice, some good stories. The one that I'm going to tell you is Madame Calimont. Listen, and you'll hear a story about this woman who had given birth to 14 girls. Her luck had run out. And she was trying to think of a way that she could get rid of that girl without God knowing it. So each morning, she would set her out in the forest in search of some useless thing that she could never find. One morning, she called her, "Ma fille, viens ici. Come here, my dog." She wanted her to go into the forest to get 4 sous worth of butter. So she gave the girl the money and she set off in the forest, whichever way you go in the forest to look for butter. With the girl, she went, no back talking and walking and daydreaming. It come to her that the only thing that she could find was that she was lost. And she couldn't find it ahead of her, and she couldn't find it behind her. So she continued to walk. And pretty soon night fall down upon her, and she was there in the wood, and she saw something. It was an old woman sitting on a stump beside a tall, tall tree. She called out to her, she said, "Maman, I'm lost." Oh, that old woman, all honey and sugary. She put her arms around the girl and she led her to her woodland hut. It was a hut made of bones, straw, and feathers of white birds, and the roof was of dry coconut held together by webless spiders. Now, in our part, we know that hut to be the hut of an OB woman, and what all you storytellers call as witches. Now, the girl, she didn't know anything about that because what she didn't know was way more than what she did know. The old woman, she led her in the hut, and the girl could see a candle illuminating a rocking chair. The old woman, she set herself on the chair. The girl, she looked at her, she said, "Maman, I'm hungry." The old woman, she said, "Oh, and me, I'm thirsty, always thirsty. Go fetch Maman some water." So the girl, she went and she fetched water. She brought it to the woman and she took it down, down, down her throat. But she wasn't satisfied. One trip led to another, and another and another, dragging one calabash to the woman, down, down, as if that throat was south of the desert. The girl, by now, she was tired and exhausted. Again, she said, Maman, I'm hungry. Oh, the old woman said, if you find out my name, I will give you all the food that you want with some butter. And I'll even show you your way home. But first things first, find out my name. And with that, the old woman, she disappeared. Now, you know, disappeared, she vanished. She was a dead woman. The girl, she stayed there in the hut until that candle, it just fluttered and sputtered out, leaving her in the darkness. No more shadow. Oh, she burst into tears, and her tears fell, causing a huge, grown snake to appear. I'm not saying a snakeling, it was a big fat snake, like a puppy dog. It crawled between the girl's legs, and it told her, there are creatures in the forest that knows the old woman's name. The girl, the late hour was now upon her. She set out to comb the forest in search of the old woman's name. She came upon a cathedral of bamboo, and in it was 22,000 rats. She questions the rats if they knew the name of the old woman. Je ne sais pas. They didn't know. So the girl, she went on and she climbed an apple tree, and at the top she saw the possums in their nocturnal feasting. But they had to apologize. Je connais pas. They didn't know her name. But the girl, she went on. She went through the backwaters, and she went through the marshes until she was ankle deep. And she asked the he-toads and the she-toads, but they was too busy in their courtship croaking back and forth where they couldn't even give her an answer. Well, the girl, she continued. She asked the wood horses and the hummingbird and the firefly. She even asked that pesky caterpillar, you know, the one that liked to circle the woman's neck and make a necklace. But je ne sais pas. No, they did not know. So the girl, she was disheartened, you know, and she went and she plopped herself down by a stream. Now, that stream, that was the home of all the crabs with their 7 wives and their progeny of crabs, and a multitude of crab cousins and godchildren crabs and godparent crabs, on and on and on. Now, you know, it made me think that crab, that was something in the day. They had beautiful long necks, and they had a regal head sitting on the top. And they wore those little flat rim boaters, you know, those little straw hats on the top. They were something in the day. Now, because they wore those little brim boaters, you know, that couldn't cover their ears. So they heard all the gossip through the grapevine, all the dirt, all the hilarious rumors, the rapid rumors, the yickety-yak, the hearsay, and all the dirty dish after a funeral. Now, you know what I'm talking about, the no, yeah, ran off with that little woman. Now, through all that jabbering, you know, you would think they didn't even hear the question, but they heard the little girl's question. And then they began to dance, and they began to sing, and they sang, Madame quel limon, brandimon, quel limon. Madame quel limon, brandimon, quel limon. Madame quel limon, brandimon, quel limon. But the little girl, she couldn't believe it. She found out their name. Well, she also asked them if they knew her way home, if they knew how she could get home. But they just kept on singing. Madame quel limon, brandimon, quel limon. Oh, it was a party. The girl, she couldn't get no more out of it. So she went back to the old woman's hut. Well, just before dawn, the old lady, she came back. She settled herself into her rocker. She looked at the girl. She lit her pipe. She removed from the folds of her dress the 30 lizards that keep you cool. She squinted her eyes and she looked at the girl and she said, "Ma fille, did you find out Maman's name?" And the girl, she was kind of flustered. She didn't know what to say. And oh, the old woman, she squinted her eye. She looked at that girl and she prepared herself to enjoy the time-honored test that she had heard so many times before that proved to be the undoing of all her victims. And in a soft, vicious voice, the same voice that she had used 700 times and 700 times and 7,000 times, 6,000 times before. She said, "If you do not say my name, I will eat you on the spot." But the girl, she fluttered and she began to ramble off one name after the other: Jeanette, Suzette, Henrietta, Marguerite, Josephine, on and on and on. And the old lady, she could not conceal her true nature anymore. For from her head, a parasitic vine started growing through, weaving in and out of her head. Her teeth turned the size of a cow, and just as young, the legs of her turned to that of the hair of a wolf. And at the end of her feet, it was hoofs. She slowly rose out of that chair, heaving, ready to devour the girl when the girl remembered the tune. Madame, quel limon, brandy mon, quel limon. Madame, quel limon, brandy mon, quel limon. And the old woman, she screamed, "You beat me, you beat me, you beat me." Oh, she was so angry. She began to pull tucks from her hair. She trampled the snakes and she trampled the lizards. Filled with rage, she looked at the girl. She said, "So, my fille, my darling, and now you eat." And she prepared a feast for her of stews and soups and bouillon, on, and desserts. It was plenty. The old woman, she grabbed her cutlass. Yes, this old woman, who was the sous chef in hair, she went out into the wood to seek revenge for who told the name. Well, she crossed the savannah and she came across an old bull they called Beef. She asked Beef, "You say my name and you will die." Well, Beef, he looked surprised. He said, "Mais non, I told no one your name." The old woman, she looked him in the eye and she knew he spoke the truth. But she was so angry, she cut off one of his horns. And you know, that's why today we have bulls with only 2 horns. The old woman, she continued on her way. At the end of savannah, she saw an old mule they called Millet. He was eating the tender grass. And she go to Millet, the mule, and poor Millet, he don't have an attorney, he doesn't have a magistrate. The old woman, she accused him of revealing her name. But Millet, he said, "Mais non, I didn't say nothing." And she looked him in the eye and she could see he was telling the truth. But because of that rage, she took up her cutlass and she cut off one of his legs. And that's why, mules today, they only have 4 legs. Well, the old woman, she went through all the animals. They all swore they did nothing. And then she came to the spring, the home of them crabs. Oh, you should have been there that day, though. Oh, it was a good time because one of their wives, she was about to give birth to one of the little crablets. So it was all festive. And then the old lady come, interrupting the birth of the crablets. Oh, the crab. He said, well, this can wait. She said, no, I want to know. Well, the crab, he had enough. He said, yes, it was us. We did it, you old witchetty witch, you old gumless hag. And before he could say anything else, Madame, oh, she raised that cutlass and she chopped off that beautiful long neck and those regal heads it scattered. But those heads, they could still be heard singing, Madame Quel-Limon, Brandimon, Quel-Limon, Madame Quel-Limon, Brandimon, Quel-Limon. Oh, it sang throughout the wood. It traveled on the undergrowth. It traveled up the trees and beyond the canopy. The old woman, she could no longer ask those the riddle. Do you know Maman's name? No more could she quench the dry throat she had. So furious she walked, and when she walked, the ground shook with each step. She hit the ground so hard, it opened up, and she fell to her death. And at that moment, the spell was broken. The girl was still in the hut. Right away, the vines, it went away, the coconut roof, the dried straw, and in its place was a beautiful palace. The he-toads and the she-toads, they turned into girls and boys. The lizards and the snake into girls and boys. And the tears that they had shed had turned into diamonds and riches all over from the families that Madame Quel-Limon had swindled money out of. And now as for the girl, they say she married that grand snake. He turned into a fine, handsome fellow. Everyone say you always welcome at their house. Even vagabonds like me can stop by after a good story and raise a glass to the fine woman of the house. C'est tout.
Thank you so much, Mark. Lovely, just lovely imagery and wonderful story. That was Mark Babino. I was corrected on the pronunciation. I apologize for mispronouncing your name, Mark. From SASA, San Antonio Storytelling Association. Thank you. So we're halfway through and we've been sitting for an hour. I'm going to we're going to take about 5 minutes, and you have an opportunity if you got to go take care of some personal business, stretch your legs, do whatever you need. Because I'm a storyteller and I have a mic and an audience, I'm going to talk a little bit about Tejas and where we are as an organization and some of the stuff that's coming up. So do whatever you need to do, but it won't be quiet. And I've got my timer. So 5 minutes, we'll kick off with David Thompson as our next teller. Some of the stuff, if you pay attention to the chat, there's a lot of really good information. And if you wait till the end, you can save the chat because it's got links to the festival that's coming up in March. It's got links to a sign in for a volunteer page for that. Also, there's information about our website where you can find a guild near you, because as you can tell, we have some magnificent, wonderfully talented tellers out there. And you can go and participate on a local level. I think I'm being told in the chat as I'm watching that Decee is back. Maybe in this 5-minute break, you can do a sound check for us, Decee. In the interim, I'll keep talking because I know that some of our guilds are back to face-to-face meetings on a monthly basis. Again, all this information is available on our website. I encourage you to get back into your storytelling. Find your local guild, whether it's a virtual or face-to-face, and get back involved. One of the new things that has happened as COVID has kind of been out there that we haven't talked much about is we have a new way that we can become members. So when you go into to the website and renew your membership, there's an option to be a sustaining member. What that means is you have the opportunity to give a certain amount each month, and that way you pay for your membership, but then anything over and above that becomes a contribution to the association, and we appreciate that. So you get a couple of benefits if you become a sustaining member. Number one, that is tax deductible. Anything above and beyond for anything above the membership is tax deductible. And I'm not sure the exact percentage, but you'll get a discount at the Story Store in the festival in March. So there are some benefits to that. So I encourage you, when you renew your membership, to go ahead and think about becoming a sustaining member. And as this thing starts coming back together and we're going to be face to face, I can't wait to see you guys in March. We've suffered 2 years of this pandemic, and we're coming out of it. And I'm so excited to be back in Denton and to be able to look y'all in the eye and give y'all hugs that I've been wanting to give you for 2 years. So I'm really excited about that. And there are many, many, many opportunities to help when you get there. And there are ways to sign up right now and become a volunteer. One of the other things that I'm really happy to announce, we just had this board action, is we've kind of restructured our summer conference a little bit. It's going to be more of a joint venture between Tejas Storytelling Association and a local guild, and we have committed to putting one on and sometime during the summer of 2024. So there's opportunities to help there. We'll have some structure from the association, and we'll also have some members on the committee from the local guild. And as I see, Janet is putting up the "We Need Volunteers," and there's that volunteer sign-in form. So jump in there and volunteer. Lots and lots of opportunities. I again encourage y'all to get back involved in your festival or your come on, brain, guilds at home. It's a wonderful, wonderful time to be a storyteller, and it's a wonderful time to be part of Tejas. I have been honored to serve on the board for a few years now, and I was fortunate enough to be coming in as president as the COVID stuff hit. And it's been really an honor to watch and to be part of how our association has come together and learned new ways to tell stories and new ways to be part of the workshops and conferences and festivals. And it's just been an honor. We didn't just survive COVID as an association, we have thrived in COVID. So we are a strong organization. I am really excited about where we're going, and that's enough out of me. And I'm wondering, I think, have we been able to check Decee's sound? Is he able to tell? Because if he is, we'll have him kick off the second half. I see Janet is reminding me, she is our logistics director of the festival this year. So thank you very much, Janet. She's also one of those multitaskers who's on our tech team right now. And as you can see in the chat, we need team leaders and happy workers to set up, help operate, and pack up the festival. So I don't think that we're able to put Decee on yet. So I have exhausted my time, but it has been an honor to be part of this whole thing as we've gone through COVID. And with that, still the Cajun flavor of Mark's story. Let's take a deep breath. Our next teller is from the Central Texas Storytelling Guild. Oh, Decee is on. I know that he's on, but I don't. Can we do a mic check, Decee? I don't know if you're ready to tell.
Oh,
I'm always ready to tell a story.
I know you are. I know you are. So I apologize, David, for that false excitement. We do have from Tags, from the Fort Worth area and Tags, we have Decee Cornish, award-winning storyteller, does a tremendous amount of work with youth. He actually came to my school when I was living up there and told for my students. It was a beautiful thing. So if y'all would, please give me some jazz hands for Decee Cornish.
Well, how is everyone? I hope you're doing well. It's a bit chilly up here in North Texas. And well, I'm trying to do the best I can to keep warm. So keep warm, keep happy, keep telling stories. I'm going to share with you a moment from African-American history and culture. It all began right here in good old Fort Worth, or what we call from the hood, Funky Town. So it began right here in Funky Town. There was a lady, she had been teaching at a black school, black woman, and she'd been teaching all her life. And she actually loved her job very, very much, but just like all things, all good things come to an end, and time came for her to retire. Her husband had passed, and she had some girls. And, well, she had 3 girls. She had some girls, and they loved their mom. And they would come by and visit their mom. And one of the things that happened was they would come by sometimes and their mama would be sitting on the sofa dressed like she was going to school. And so they finally said, well, Mama, you know what? You need to find something to do with your time, you know? And so they started coming up with different ideas, and she always kind of just poo-pooed everything. But then one Sunday at church, she run into a church member who told her about them cut rate free bus trips to the casino in Louisiana. Now, for those of you that don't know North Texas, you can catch I-30 and I-20, and it'll take you straight on into Louisiana. The first casino you hit is in Shreveport, Louisiana. There's a funny thing about Texas and Louisiana. You can tell where the priorities are. Anytime you leave the state of Texas, whether you're going on I-35 or I-10 or I-30, as soon as you cross the border, the first thing you see is a casino. That's right, they want your money. They know you're gonna bring it, so here you come. Now, you coming down I-35, you cross the Red River, what's the first thing you see in Texas? DW's adult video stuff. That's right, we got issues. I'm sorry, forgive me, I digress. Let's keep moving. So they decided, she kind of dropped them hints. You know how you drop hints. So she was like, I heard that they so much fun. And my friend went. So the girls acted like they didn't hear nothing because they was gonna pull it off on their mom. So they actually got her a ticket to go. They made arrangements, and you really don't even need a ticket, you just have to show up. Because the buses would show up at the malls. You hardly see malls anymore. But they would show up at the malls, and they would park in the corner, and people would pull up, park their car, get on the bus, and ride to the casino, and the bus would bring you back, drop you off right where they picked you up. So they riding on that bus, man, and they having fun. It's a wonderful trip. Nice trip, nice casino, everything is nice. So they told her they had the tickets. And she was like, ooh, I'm just so excited to go. Oh, I'm just so excited to go. I can't wait to go. And so she was just so excited to go. And then they capped it off. They got her one of them brand new cell phones, one of them kind that flip open. Now, y'all remember flip phones, but you know what? Flip phones is coming back. But a flip phone. So she had that flip phone. She flipped that phone, and it had all kind of buttons on it. She told me, I don't know how to work none of them buttons. She said, well, tell you what, you know my phone number? You know, yeah, we all know each other's phone number. If you're ever in trouble, press 911, and you talk straight to the police. She was like, oh Woo, you kidding? No, no, mama. 911. If you ever get in trouble. Well, how do I turn this thing on? Just flip it open. And she flipped it open and the lights come on. She'd be like, woo, look this thing pretty. Well, the time comes that next day for her to catch her bus. They took her to the bus. They say she caught the bus at Redbird Mall in Dallas, Texas. And she caught the bus at Redbird Mall in Dallas, Texas. She got on that bus. Now, everything is fine on the bus. They serve, you know, they serve the same kind of food they serve on Southwest Airlines, cheap liquor and peanuts. So they got, so they ride, everybody riding along, enjoying things. And then they stop in Tyler, Texas. Now, when they stop in Tyler, Texas, there's a big, if you ever driving through there, stop in Tyler, Texas, they got a big truck stop right there near the end. And they stopped at the truck stop. Now, the truck stop was a regular stop for the bus driver because he had a credit card to get the bus service and everything. So he got off the bus. Now, what didn't nobody notice in the parking lot was a green Pontiac. Had 4 fellas in it. Now, this green Pontiac, it had actually been following the bus since they had left Rockwall, Texas. So they riding along, man. They pull up in there. The bus driver gets out, man. He puts the thing in there. He pumps in there a whole bunch of gas. And they tell everybody that this is gonna be a 10-minute stop. You wanna go in and get something to drink, use the bathroom, go ahead. Well, the bus driver, he's pumping that gas. He finishes pumping the gas, he tops off the gas, he closes it, starts walking back into the truck stop. Now, as he walks into the truck stop, when he comes out the trucker's entrance. He comes out the trucker's entrance, and when he walks by, a fella yells at him and says, "Hey, man, could you help me with my car? I don't know what's wrong with it." He said, "Yeah, I'll take a look at it." He turned his back, walked by the dumpster, whop, they hit him in the head, knocked him clean out. They took his shirt, his hat, and they put him in the dumpster. That fella walked back over and got on the bus. Got behind the wheel, started blowing the horn like he was running things. Now, when he got on the bus, he didn't get on the bus by himself. There was another fella that got on the bus. Now, when the people started getting back on the bus, they all kind of looked around, kind of like, you know, well, maybe they changed drivers. And, you know, so nobody said anything. And they just was kind of going along with the program, having fun, laughing and talking. The bus pulled off. Boom. And man, I mean, that rascal pulled off. Must have been running about 70. He running about 70, that big Continental Trailways, man. He rolling. That Continental rolling, man, I'm telling you. And so they get to the stretches. If you ever ride that way going to Louisiana, they got long stretches where you got a median and you got 2 lanes over here, 2 lanes over here. They got in one of them stretches. And some of them can be 15, 20 miles long. You know, Texas, big state. So man, they going along. And they've been running, like I say, 70 miles an hour. And then all of a sudden they started going slow. They started going slower and slower. Everybody was fine. Somebody started hollering, "Hey, what's the matter? We got problems?" That fella in the back stood up and he said, "No, we ain't got no problem. No problem at all." He went in his waistband, pulled out a Colt 45 pistol, one of them 911 jobs. And man, he come out there, he had that gun. And he walked over to one of them women and he put his gun in her face and said, "Give me all your money, give me all your money, put it in there." And he had a bag, one of them bags you get for free when you go to the mall. He put it in there. And man, folks was throwing things in that bag. Folks was throwing things in that bag. Now that teacher was sitting up in the front. And she was sitting there, she looked back, she saw what was happening, and she got scared, and she went in and she found that cell phone. She opened that cell phone and she remembered, they told her she was in trouble, dial 911. So she dialed 911. Now she was scared to hold it up and she didn't know what to do with it. And that fella walked right up, about 2 seats behind her. He got right there and she looked over her shoulder. She stuck it in the purse, but she left it open. Now, when she left it open, she heard the 911 operator say, "What is your emergency? Can I help you?" And she folded her arms across her chest and she said, "Yes, you can. Yes. I can't believe it. I'm sitting here on the bus going to the casino in Shreveport, Louisiana, and these fellas is putting a gun on me. This don't make no sense. I paid good money to ride this bus all the way to Shreveport, Louisiana, where I'm gonna be gambling. And this fella has got a gun on me, and you robbing everybody. Have you lost your mind, boy? What is wrong with you?" That fella pulled that gun and said, "Shut up, old woman, shut up." Then she said, "I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna shut up, but I don't have to because I'm so happy to be riding on this bus. My daughter's bought me a trip to the casino in Shreveport, Louisiana, and here I am on the red and green Continental Trailways bus going toward Louisiana. This don't make no sense." The other fella came up and said, "I'm gonna give me your money. Give me your money now. Give it here to me. Give it. I ain't giving you nothing. Hard as I work for the money I got to spend at the casino while I ride in the Continental Trailways bus." And finally, the fella that was driving told me, "Man, leave that woman alone and come on. Come on, man, leave that woman alone. Come on, man, it ain't worth it. Now, everything she'd have yelled and been transmitted over the 911 phone call. They come over one of them hills. They top that hill. Now, when they topped that hill, sitting at the bottom of the hill was state troopers. They started slowing down, but it was no way to get off because you had a big ditch on this side, big ditch on that side. State troopers got the roads blocked off. They started slowing down. You can look at the distance back behind them and you can see the lights coming. Well, they got in there, they had them. Now, I'm gonna tell you something. The other two fellas was following in that gay Pontiac. And when they got the call and they started booming like that, shooting by, them troopers started shooting by, them fellas made a U-turn. And when they made a U-turn, that gave them away. So the state troopers get on the bus, they get everybody, get everything calmed down, say, "Well, this bus is a crime scene now. We're gonna have to take it back to the county seat." Now, Tyler is the county seat for Smith County. They had already made it all the way to Smith County. And so they come back around, they double back around, they come back around. They go back in there and they get everybody inside the courtroom and in the waiting area, and they giving folks their stuff. Because when the guy came through holding the bag like this, some men just took their whole wallet, threw the whole wallet in there. And some of them got their wallets and stuff back like that. But once everything that was easily identified was divided up, most of the folk that was there, that it belonged to, there was $2,782 in cash money left in that bag. Well, they went and they got the judge that was there and they told him that they had this money. And he said, "I got an idea. Have everybody fill out an affidavit for how much money they put in the bag." So they did. The bailiff passed out the affidavits and everybody sat there and swore to the judge that this is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And they passed in, they turned in the affidavits. Now, when they turned in the affidavits, whoo, man, I'm telling you, everybody was excited, expecting to get their money until the bailiff walked in. He walked over to the judge and said, "Your Honor, we got a problem." He said, "What is that?" He said, "Well, Honor, you know there was $2,782 in that bag. But we added up all these sworn affidavits and we came to $4,105. The judge said, "What?" The judge said, "There's obviously been a problem here. And I want everybody to have a come to Jesus moment and fill these affidavits out now, because so y'all can get on y'all's way. They filled them out again. The bailiff walked in with more badly. He said, Your Honor, you know there was $2,782 in the bag, right? The Honor said, uh-huh. He said, well, we added up all the affidavits and they came to $5,026. The judge looked at him and said, I'm gonna try this one more time. He gave out the affidavits, they added them up, and he done better than he did the first two times, because although there was $2,782 in the bag, this time they only needed to come up with $3,056.37. Well, like all good stories, they have a moral to this one. And oftentimes we tell the kids little things like that, and they don't really get it. Sometimes we as adults, we forget too. But the judge told everybody to go home. He gave them all the affidavit, told them, y'all go home. Some of y'all want to go on to the casino, do whatever you do, but take that with you and mail it in. And what we'll do is when we get all mailed in ballots and they add up to the amount of money we got, we will send you your money. Now, this happened in Smith County, the great state of Texas, in 1996. You know where that $2,782 is? It's still in the Smith County evidence room. And that's because we forgot one of the rules that we was taught when we was babies, that honesty is the best policy. Thank you for listening to the stuff.
Thank you, Decee. What yeah, okay. Human nature is still human nature, right? Although I think I had $50 in that and on that bus too. I'm not sure. Thank you, Decee. From Tags from Fort Worth. Our next storyteller comes from the Central Texas Storytelling Guild, located in Austin. There's a wonderful tradition of storytelling there. The Tejas is just a small part of that. They do a lot of storytelling there. And this guy, David Thompson, he's kind of new at this. He's only been doing it for about 45 years. And he is an international storyteller. So please help us welcome to the screen, David Thompson.
It always helps to unmute yourself. Hello, everyone. Well, we've been everywhere and all over the place and things like this. And I'm going to take you somewhere back in history. I'm going to take you somewhere that you probably have never been. Maybe you have. I don't know. The story I'm going to tell you today is an Aztec tale. It's an Aztec legend. Now, when you think of Aztecs and you think of the Mesoamericans, and we have this idea of step pyramids and bloody wars and crazy people doing all sorts of things. But this story is one of the most beautiful stories that I have come across. This story is The Plumed Serpent and the Morning Star. Nitsi tiale piale maku wale walaka nik no SASA dir. Hello, my friends, and welcome to my story. When Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, walked upon the earth, he gathered all the people and he brought them together. And he created the city of the sun, the city of Tula. And it was there, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, taught them how to write, taught them how to work gold and silver, taught them how to weave feathers, taught them writing, gave them the calendar to mark the days, and all were happy. And the city prospered. And in the middle of the city on a high hill stood the palace of Quetzalcoatl, high priest and king of his people. plumed serpent that he is. And these 4 walls of this palace were glorious beyond belief. The east was gold with sunshine and crystals and gold beaten thin. The west was green with turquoise and jade, the south silver and pale with pearls and silver, and the north red with bloodstones and rubies and shells. And in the middle, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, sat. For underneath was a great river. Underneath the palace of the 4 walls was a great river that Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, went down in the evenings to bathe and do his devotions. And this was called the river of precious place. And all was well. One day, a stranger was approaching the palace of Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people. It was a rival god from an alien land, Tezcatlipoca of the smoking mirror, the mirror of obsidian that would show you the future events of your life. Tezcatlipoca of the smoking mirror went up to the gate and said, "Tell your master to come here, for I wish to show him his flesh." And the guard went and told his master, and Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, came and said, "What do you mean? Show me my flesh." And then Tezcatlipoca took the obsidian mirror and opened it and showed him his face. Quetzalcoatl looked in and he was horrified. He saw wrinkles and rheumy red eyes and scraggly beard and thin. "Oh, this cannot be. I cannot go out into my people looking like this. They will be horrified." Oh, calm down. Calm down, Tezcatlipoca said. "Calm down here. Drink this." And he offered him a vessel of pulque made from the maguey plant. And there he also had put sacred magic mushrooms. No, I can't. I'm sick. I can't. No. Just take your finger, dip it, touch it to your tongue, which is what Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, did. And he was taken. He was taken aback, and he grabbed the vessel, and in one gulp, he drank it all. And there he knew the sky. There he traveled and saw the gods. And there he sent for his sister, Quetzalcoatl, and he gave her some. And they knew the universe, and they knew the earth, and they knew the gods, and they knew each other. The next day, when Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, awoke, he saw what had happened. He sent his sister back, for he knew he had done so terribly wrong. He demanded a pit be dug so he may go down into the darkness and do penance. And so he did. And it was covered over. And for 4 days of darkness, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, high priest and king of his people, did penance for his wrongdoing. After 4 days, he came out and said, I cannot stay. I cannot rule you. I must leave. I must go east to the land of Tlapalan, the land of the red day. But I shall return. And there it was, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, no longer high priest and king of his people, burned his palace, threw his jewels and his gold into the mountains, turned his cacao trees, his chocolate trees into mesquite bushes, and brought the quetzal birds, the glorious jeweled birds, to lead him to Tlapalan, the land of the red day. And with Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, no longer high priest and king of his people, with flutists and dancers and people who loved him and his entourage. And they went east. And after a while, they rested. And where they rested was a tree. And that tree was lovely. And it swayed in the wind. Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, went up. But he looked at the bark of the tree and saw it was wrinkled like his face. And he saw that it aged. And it became known as Huehuecoatitlan, the tree of old age. Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, with his entourage, continued traveling east towards Tlapalan, the land of the red day. And again he turned and he sat on rocks and he rested and he looked back at his city of Tula, the golden city. Tears flowed from his eyes and down his wrinkled face. They flowed down and they cut streams into the stone. His hands and his back and his head made impressions which are still there. And this became known as Temacpaco, the mark of the hands. He rested where he knew he must go, and the entire entourage continued to journey east towards Tlapalan, the land of the red day. And he came into an alien country, and there were alien gods that came, and they demanded that he teach them how to weave feathers, how to work gold and silver, how to write, how to tell time and make a calendar. Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, freely gave them to him, for he had no use for them anymore. And there he took off his jeweled collar and he tossed it into the streams, where they became known as Kozkaapa, the water of precious stones. And they continued their journey towards Tlapalan, the land of the red day. And again, an alien god came and held Quetzalcoatl and demanded that he drink from this vessel. And he forced it down his throat. And Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, fell to the ground in a deep, deep sleep. And when he awoke, it was a plain of silence. No wind, no breeze, no sound of animals. And he became known as Koktan, the place of the sleepers. And again, the entourage rose, and again they went towards Tlapalan, the land of the red day. And they passed between two mountains, a volcano and a mountain of snow. And they poured heat and fire and lava and water and snow down upon them, down upon them, down upon them. And all were covered except Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent. And when he turned and he looked and he saw his entourage all dead, he let out a song of mourning like the most desolate bird you had ever heard. But he knew he had to continue. So he went and he walked. He walked eastward and he climbed Mount Poyahoticatl, the hill of many colors, for on the other side was the ocean, the great waters. And he did, and he got there and he summoned serpents to him, and they bowed to him and he bowed to them. And they took themselves and they wove themselves into a raft upon the waters. And Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, stepped on their back. And they floated across the great sea towards Tlapalan, the land of the red day. They arrived on the beach. The snakes untangled themselves. They rose and they bowed to Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent, and he bowed back to them. And they went their ways. And there on the beach, Quetzalcoatl, plumed serpent, built a great bonfire and threw himself upon it. And his heart began to beat faster and deeper and louder, and it burst forth from his body and ascended into the heavens, escorted by great quetzal birds, where it became Venus, the morning star, she who leads the sun from his hiding place. Oh, some say Quetzalcoatl is not dead. They say he sleeps, for he had promised to return. And so he shall, this once and future king, someday, one day. Tlazokamati. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I find myself hard to speak. I'm still in the middle of your story. So thank you. Austin, Central Texas Stories. Thank you, David. Just still there, but I appreciate that. Our next storyteller comes from the East Texas Storytelling Guild. She's got Irish storytellers and Wisconsin state liars in her blood. So naturally she would spring forth as a storyteller. She does a lot of work around the Tyler area and in East Texas. So please give me some jazz hands for Liz Easterling.
Thanks, David. It's a pleasure to be here. And the story that I have for you today is called The Magic Pomegranate. It comes from Jewish stories that one generation tells another. Once there were three brothers who loved adventure. They'd been on plenty of adventures together, of course, but it was time to do something different. So they decided that they would each take their own journey. Each would travel to distant lands. Each would come back with one unique item to show the others, and they would meet back in 10 years' time. So off they set. The eldest brother traveled to the east, and He kept his mind open to adventure and his eyes open for that one special something. Well, as he was entering one particular city one day, he was fascinated and amazed by all the colors and excitement and activity that was taking place. There were dancing girls and jugglers and acrobats, musicians and magicians on every corner. As he was trying to watch all of this entertainment, he saw a magician bring out a glass globe. Curious, he went over to investigate. Tell me, what does it do? Ah, take a look inside. You'll be able to see any corner of the kingdom. Oh, when the brother looked inside, he knew he had found his one special item. He had to have it. Tell me, how much is it? He said. But the magician said, oh, no. It's not for sale. That brother was persistent. There was a great deal of bargaining and haggling back and forth, and eventually the glass globe was carefully wrapped up and the brother had his treasure. Well, the second brother traveled to the west. He too kept his mind open and his eyes open. And as he was walking through a crowded marketplace one day, listening to the clamor of the merchants as they hawked their wares, he heard one voice in particular rise above the others. Carpets for sale, beautiful, wonderful carpets for sale. Intrigued, he found the merchant's stall. Well, the carpets were stacked up everywhere, and he began to examine the rugs. And as he looked, there was one in particular at the very bottom that seemed to be moving on its own. That one, I want to see that one, he said. And the merchant smiled. He pulled it out and then motioned for the brother to lean down so he could whisper to him. It's magic, he said. Sit on it and it will take you wherever you desire in the blink of an eye. Oh, he had to have it. But it too required a great deal of haggling and bargaining. But eventually that carpet was rolled up and the brother left with his treasure. The third brother had traveled to the south, and at some point in his journey, he found himself journeying through a land that was well known for its forests, beautiful forests. He was taking a walk in a pretty little grove one day when he noticed one tree that was different from the others. It was a different size, it was a different shape, but most notably, it was covered in beautiful orangey red blossoms. As he got closer to it, he thought, that looks like a pomegranate tree. And it was. But the strange thing was that there was only one fruit hanging from it, in spite of all those blossoms. He chuckled a little bit to himself, thinking that he would have a funny story to tell his brothers about the strange tree in the middle of nowhere with only one fruit on it. But then he reached up to pluck it, and just before he could even touch it, it fell right into his hand, as if it wanted to be picked. Stranger still, another pomegranate burst forth from one of the blossoms, but only one. He wondered, I wonder if this is some sort of magic pomegranate. He examined it and admired its perfect shape and its smooth, unblemished flesh. He started walking away with it in his hands, and he turned back one last time to have another look at the tree, but the tree had vanished. It was completely gone. This must be some sort of magic, but what sort of magic could it possibly have, he wondered. Well, the 10 years' time passed, and the brothers were reunited. And what a joyous reunion it was. There was a lot of hugging and laughing and stories. And then it was time to bring out their special items. Well, the eldest brother went first, and with a flourish, he brought out the globe and told them about the magician. And they gazed into it, eager to see what they might discover. But what they saw was disturbing. They could see a king's palace, and inside the palace, they could see a bedchamber, and there was a young woman lying on the bed, but she looked very ill. She was deathly pale, and her breathing was labored and raspy. "Oh, we must go to her," the oldest brother said. But we have no way to find her, and how could we even get to her in time? And the second brother jumped up in excitement and said, "Oh, but we do have a way." He quickly unrolled his carpet, told them about the merchant he had met. "We will get on it, and it will take us there in a flash," he promised. Well, when they arrived at the palace, they learned that the king had brought in doctor after doctor and healer after healer, but nobody had been able to cure his daughter. In desperation, he had announced that anyone who could cure his daughter might have her hand in marriage and half the kingdom. Well, as if in a dream, the youngest brother felt a voice coming up inside him saying, "The pomegranate, the pomegranate." So he went to the king and said, "Your Majesty, I would like to try to help your daughter, if you will allow me." The king was ready to do anything to help his daughter. So he took the young man to her bedchamber, and the young man sat down next to her. And then he carefully cut the pomegranate in half and began scooping out those juicy red kernels and feeding them to her, one at a time, placing them between her lips. After she had swallowed a few, the color started coming back into her face. A few more, and her breathing became regular and normal again. And then she sat up, opened her eyes, and she was completely cured. Well, her father was overjoyed. He ran in and he hugged her and kissed her. And then he turned to the three brothers and he said, "Whichever one of you cured her may have her hand in marriage." Well, you can probably guess what happened next. The brothers started quarreling with each other. The eldest one said, "Well, she should marry me because without my globe, we would never have known about her predicament." And the second brother said, No, she should marry me because without my magic carpet, we would never have arrived in time to save her. And the third one said, hold it. It was my pomegranate. She needs to marry me." They argued back and forth, round and around, unable to come to any kind of agreement. So finally, the king stepped in. He said he would make the decision. But as he looked at the young men, he thought, well, they all really seem to care about my daughter. They're all clever, handsome, intelligent young men. Any one of them would make a fine husband for her. And he couldn't make up his mind either. So finally, he turned to his daughter and said, "My dear, you choose which young man you wish to marry." She said she would need to ask each young man one question. So she asked the eldest brother, "Tell me, has your magic globe changed in any way since you arrived in the kingdom?" And he said, "Oh, no, Your Highness. Take a look for yourself. Any place in the kingdom you wish to see, you can see, just look." And she said, "Thank you." She turned to the next brother and asked him, "Tell me, your magic carpet, has it changed in any way since you arrived in the kingdom?" And he said, "Oh, no, Your Highness. When we sit on it, you can go any place you desire in the blink of an eye." "Thank you," she said. Finally, she turned to the third brother and said, "Your pomegranate, has it changed in any way since you arrived in the kingdom?" And he said, "Well, yes, Your Highness. It's no longer whole because, you see, I shared it with you." "I will marry the third brother," she said. Oh, well, a lavish and beautiful wedding was planned, and just a few weeks later, they were joyously united in matrimony. The king, meanwhile, had been so taken with all three brothers that he retained all three of them and his daughter to be his most trusted and closest advisors. And all of them came to see the wisdom of the princess's choice. Because isn't it true that the one who gives of themselves is the one who gives the greatest gift? Thank you. The Magic Pomegranate.
Thank you, Liz. And how fortunate we are that you came and gave of yourself with your story today. Thank you. We're getting close to the end, and I get to use maybe my favorite word in the whole wide world, because I now get to introduce the Telebration's penultimate storyteller. That means second to last. And we've got audio on the clapping. Heart of Texas from Waco presents a storyteller by the name of Stephen Smith. He is a brand new member of the Heart of Texas Storytelling Association. He's not new to performance, though, because someone told me that he has been Theodore Roosevelt a few times in his past. I do know that he's an enthusiastic member, and I'm looking forward to seeing how our relationship with not only Tejas, but with Heart of Texas grows. So put your and our jazz hands up and welcome Stephen Smith to the screen, please.
Well, thank you, David. The story I'm going to tell today is true, and I haven't changed any of the names, but the main character is J. Maurice Finn. Now, Finn was born in Michigan. He was raised there. He attended school there. Ann Arbor, where he graduated with a law degree. He graduated at the top of his class. Successful law practice in Michigan, and became fairly wealthy. But like a lot of men in that position, he wanted just a little more. What he wanted now was power. So he ran for the state legislature. In spite of the fact that he had good recommendations, he had a lot of money to spend, he lost that election. He couldn't believe it. He would tell anybody that listened the election was stolen. He said it so often and so publicly that newspapers started to call him a crybaby. Well, a man in his position, he couldn't have that. So he decided he needed to leave Michigan. But about that time, gold was discovered in West. So he moved to a small town in Colorado called Cripple Creek, where gold was being mined so ferociously that millionaires were created every week. He started another law practice. It grew. He had miners as his clients. He had mine owners. He invested heavily in the mines. He sat on mining boards. And once again, his wealth began to grow. In fact, at one point, he had so much money, he built the largest home in Cripple Creek. It cost $50,000. And to put that into perspective, the county built a 3-story hospital and it only cost them $12,000. Well, he was so proud of this house, a house that he called the Towers, that he invited then Vice President Theodore Roosevelt to his housewarming. Well, Roosevelt did come to town. He got off the train, but he was so busy shaking hands and making speeches that it was almost nightfall by the time he made it to the house. And he barely stepped inside, shook Finn's hand, and left. But he did come. Well, Mr. Finn was very proud of his accomplishments. And one morning, he was reading the newspaper, and there was a story that caught his eye. It said that a murder had occurred in Cripple Creek. The story went on to say that a man named James Edwards walked into a bar on Christmas Eve to celebrate. While he was there, he became involved in a heated argument with the bar owner, a Mr. Brooks. And at one point during that argument, Mr. Brooks took his Colt 45 and he hit the victim on the top of the head. The victim fell to the floor. A lot of people thought it was funny, and he laid there for quite a while before a doctor was called. He was pronounced dead, and they charged the bar owner with murder. Now, J. Maurice Finn had just printed up some business cards, and there it was in bold letters, J. Maurice Finn, Esquire, attorney at law, competent in all courts. The only trouble was he had really never tried a murder trial. So he thought, this is my chance. The day came, they sat in the courtroom, and the prosecutor laid out the case, much as I've described for you. And the whole time, J. Maurice sat there, impeccably dressed, smiling, nodding, seeming to agree with the prosecutor. Well, when it was his turn, he stood before the jury and magically produced a white object. You see, he had the coroner remove the top of the victim's skull. He showed it to the jury. And he said, this skull is as thin as an eggshell. Had you or I been struck in a similar manner, we'd have a headache, nothing more. No, this was not murder. This was a tragic accident, an accident of the victim's own doing, because his head was as thin as an eggshell. Well, the jury bought that argument, and the bar owner was found not guilty. Well, J. Maurice Finn walked around town like the cock of the roost. He was so happy. Newspaper articles from as far away as Kansas called him the oratorical whirlwind of the West. Well, you would think that these kind of accolades would cause his fortunes to rise. But Finn made a big mistake. He really didn't realize what a well-liked man the victim was. And other miners who were his clients kind of disappeared. Mine owners didn't like that brand of justice. They took their business elsewhere. The townsfolk started calling his gorgeous house Finn's Folly. Well, as business declined, he could no longer afford that great house. It was eventually sold off piecemeal to pay his debts. And as the story goes, J. Maurice Finn died penniless. Sort of like Icarus flying too close to the sun. Now, when I first heard of this story, I mentioned it to my daughter-in-law, who had been attending law school at the time. And she said, "You're not going to believe this. We just heard about that case today." Now, that's not a proper defense. You can't blame the victim for his own doing like that. So maybe, just maybe, J. Maurice Finn did make his mark on society after all. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And welcome to the heart of Texas. It'll be a great addition. So, as we get close to the end, we have another storyteller He hails from Houston. Hank has spent 45 years as a career teaching communications, 40 of that at the University of Houston downtown. He started and hosts a radio show here in Houston called So What's Your Story? It's on WKPFT 90.1. And he's also one of our board members. And it's been a pleasure to get to know him and see how he works over the last couple of years, and looking forward to a long relationship. So if y'all would please, jazz hands for Hank Roubicek from Houston Storytelling.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it. Boy, this is an incredibly difficult group of tellers to follow. Of course, I'm last, so I'm everybody's favorite, right? What a great set of tellers. I'm changing it up a bit. My story is a personal narrative. And, you know, sometimes you wonder if stories that you tell your family make any kind of an impact. When I visited my son, Josh, a few weeks ago, I found out that they do. We talked a little bit about our lives and reflected about a number of things. And he told me that he remembered a few stories in particular. And this is one that he really liked. And it inspired me to share it with you. To me, a dad isn't someone who necessarily stands tall, but it's someone who can bend down and look at his son, his daughter, straight in the eye and love them. That's all theoretical because I never had a dad like that. He left when I was 14 years old. He wasn't a bad man, but he was weak and he was sick. I tried for a lot of years to reach out, to connect with him, but it didn't work. It's one of the reasons that my favorite play is Robert Anderson's I Never Sang for My Father. Singing is indeed literal in the play, but it extends into a much deeper meaning. It's a motif representing something much more. But I wanted to be a fantastic father. That was my primary goal in life. What I wanted is, if you looked up father in the dictionary, I wanted my photo to be all over the place. Different profiles, every conceivable way. So you can imagine how I felt when I came home 2 days before my birthday in 1989, and found that my family was gone. My wife at the time took my son and moved to Florida. I knew she hated it here, and she threatened to leave every day, and by golly, she certainly did. I looked around the house, I remember, and I saw my son's toys scattered around the house. He was 2 years old. And it was November around 6:30, so it was dark. No lights were on. The landscape in my house matched the darkness I felt. I remember I had a lump in my throat that landed in my gut and just stayed there. My heart hurt. Everything hurt. I was numb. I didn't really know what to do, but I did soon learn that talking with lawyers was the absolute wrong thing to do because they had no concept of what was right, only what was legal. What was right is to find a way to cultivate a relationship with my son. I needed help. And I remember getting some really wonderful guidance. And as a result, I remember talking to some people and I began writing journals. At this point, I have over 120 of them. And I went to Florida every month for 14 years. I want to repeat that. I went to Florida every month for 14 years. There's no exaggeration to that statement at all. Of course, he was with me every summer and vacation, and despite having tenure at the university and making a pretty good living, I took every side job that I could because the airlines wasn't letting me on for free. For summers and vacations, I remember that until Josh was 10 years old, in those days, It was safe for a child to travel by himself. But, and he also loved it because I had a student who worked for Continental Airlines who always let Josh sit in first class. So he was spoiled rotten. He loved that part of it. But I remember during summers in particular, I had to fly to Florida to get him, fly us both back to Houston, both back to Florida, and then myself back. I was always broke. I kept every ticket because when I feel down or vulnerable or sad, I look at those tickets and I find strength. I called him every day for years. His mom hated it, of course, but I learned to deflect anger. That's one thing you learn in experiences like this. You know, I had a PhD in communication, and I had to learn to talk with my son on the phone. It was that basic. I wanted to keep him on the phone as long as possible. So I would never ask him questions like, how's school? We like asking those kind of questions, don't we? But we get a closed response. Fine, yes, no, that wouldn't work. So I had to ask him open questions. Questions like, you know, I understand you're talking about the heart at school this week, and I want to know how you take someone else's pulse. So he would say, well, Daddy, you know what you do? You put your hand on your pulse and you go pa-pum, 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 pa-pum. I asked him those kind of questions because I called his teachers every Monday morning to find out what they were covering in school that week. I wanted to be involved. I also wrote letters to him every week. You see, a real father, I learned, is one who isn't afraid to test his strengths. Actually, no, it's a dad who is afraid, but does it anyway. After a few years, you know, visiting my son became a lot easier because my mother and my stepdad moved to Florida full time. So no longer was I living in La Quintas and Hamptons. I actually sort of had a family there. And I had a lot of wonderful memories during those very challenging years. Some were very unpleasant, but mostly they were absolutely terrific, transformed me for the better. One of those reflections was Father's Day, 1999. My son is 12 years old. I take him and a friend to a movie. And on the way out of the movie, as we're in the lobby, going back to the car, I hear his friend Oliver turn to my son and say, you know, I haven't seen my dad in a long time. Now, of course, I'm standing behind them because anything else would be incredibly embarrassing to them. And then I heard my son turn to him and say, my dad's always there. Always. I'm 997 miles away. But he thought I was always here. That following day, on Sunday, I asked him if I could help him with his homework. It was sort of a ritual. We did homework together on the Sunday before I brought him back to his mom. And for some reason, he wasn't really anxious in talking to me about his homework. I probed and I prodded a little bit, but he had a lot of trepidation for some reason. Finally, he told me what his assignment was. He said, well, my assignment is that we have to talk about, in a paper, we have to write about our favorite thing in our room. I said, well, what is it? He said, I really don't want to talk about it. I said, well, I kind of want you to because I don't understand why you've got so much trepidation. He says, it's a big plastic box I keep under my bed with all the letters that you write to me. I was pretty cheery. Then he looked at me and said, that's why I didn't want to tell you. You know, about 10 years ago, my father died, and my brother and I had to handle the arrangements, and all those years trying to connect with my biological father. And I hear about it on the phone by someone I didn't recognize. But you know what the hardest thing was? It was responding when he said to me, "I'm sorry for your loss." I wanted to feel sorry. I certainly hope my son feels something. That's what we want from our children, don't we? We want them to feel something about us through our stories. And I couldn't help thinking, I never sang for my father, but on Father's Day, 1999, my son sang for me. Mm. Thank you.
Thank you, Hank. Beautiful moments. I saw a comment in the chat. I'm glad you wrote those letters, and I'm glad that you had that time. So it made him feel so special, and made us feel special sharing that story with us. So thank you. What a beautiful cornucopia of stories we've had this afternoon. I think Paul Pinkerton would be proud to know that we have brought celebration to Zoom, and we've been statewide, and probably reaching out even further than that with our Zoom touch. I'm going to ask all of our storytellers to come back to the screen. That's going to take a little bit of help from our tech folks. Again, our tech people are David Brock, Dean Keith, Sue Kuentz, and Janet Bickel-Burton. And Elizabeth Beamon was our first teller. Dean Keith was our second teller. Leslie, Mark Babino, I did it again. Decee Cornish, David Thompson, Liz Easterling, Stephen Smith, and Hank Roubicek. Thank you all for sharing your stories with us. It's been a beautiful afternoon. As a little prelude, thank you, Hank, for telling that personal story. Our next virtual event is January the 16th, sponsored by the North 40 group of storytellers. It's going to be Reggie Carpenter helping us learn how to take our personal stories and putting them into personal family histories and putting them into story. So thank you all for sharing your afternoon with us and your stories with us. Without our audience, though, we would all be sitting here staring at one another. So I want to thank all of our audience members. If you're interested to get more involved, please, we've got the festival coming up. There'll be lots of information coming to you via email about how you can help us out. I think the biggest number I saw was about 81 or 82 audience members, which is just wonderful. I love to be able to, it's such an honor to be part of such an event and share stories with you guys. Thank you all. Looking forward to our time together in March in Denton. Looking forward to January the 16th when we can get together and learn how to share our stories from our family history. So thank all you guys. One more set of jazz hands for all of our storytellers. Thank Paul Pinkerton for coming up with this idea. Thank all of the board, all of the members of Tejas for putting this whole thing, sponsoring this whole thing. And again, our tech team. Without you guys, we wouldn't even be able to do this. So thank everybody. Love you guys. See you in Denton. This